This exchange gets heated fast, but the double standard being called out here is something a lot of Americans have already started noticing for themselves. Before we dive into it, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you think about this debate. This clip perfectly exposes one of the biggest problems with modern Republican politics, the blatant hypocrisy when it comes to the economy and the cost of living. In this segment, Navarro gets into a heated exchange with MAGA commentator Jason Rantz over the double standard Republicans apply depending on whether a Democrat or Donald Trump is in office. Because when gas prices were high under Joe Biden, Republicans acted like it was the end of the world. They blamed Biden for every increase, held press conferences at gas stations, and accused Democrats of being completely out of touch with ordinary Americans. But now that gas prices are rising again under Donald Trump during the Iran conflict, suddenly Republicans are telling Americans to stay calm, be patient, and accept temporary sacrifice because now the pain is supposedly patriotic. And that's exactly what Navarro called out. She pointed out that many Republicans who demanded accountability from Biden are now defending Trump while Americans are once again struggling with rising costs. What made the exchange even more revealing was that Jason Rantz never really addressed her core argument. Instead, he focused on one small detail about Pete Buttigieg taking road trips while serving as transportation secretary, basically trying to sidetrack the conversation instead of defending the larger Republican contradiction. And ultimately, this debate became about something much bigger than gas prices. It became about political honesty, accountability, and whether Republicans actually believe the standards they apply to Democrats, or if those standards disappear the moment Donald Trump is involved. Let's get into it.
Tonight, Republicans have a new message for Americans concerned about rising gas prices. Just relax.
Look, this is not going to last forever, and gas prices are going to go back down.
How do you know that?
Well, I know that because this war is not going to last forever.
The gas price situation is tough, but I don't think that's going to be resolved in the next few weeks. I think by, call it Labor Day, it's all in the rearview mirror.
The fact of the matter is everybody relax. Fuel prices will go down. Iran's going to end very, very soon.
You might recall, this is the same party that attacked Joe Biden throughout his presidency, accusing him of inaction over high gas prices.
He's not being honest about inflation. Inflation is picking up. Look at gas prices, up over 70 cents a gallon since he got elected.
The national average price for a gallon of gas reached $4.32 on Sunday. And yes, that is the highest price in U.S. history. What is so hard about just being honest with the American people? President Biden should accept responsibility for the past year of rising prices.
We see people postponing their vacations. So this is having a devastating impact to normal families all across my state. The Biden administration is just tone deaf.
In standard fashion, the Biden administration has tried to blame someone else. Mr. Biden has implausibly blamed Vladimir Putin for the high price of gasoline.
You heard Rick Scott there saying the Biden administration was tone deaf, and he was right. So are Republicans doing the same?
Yeah, I don't think this is something to be glib about. This is certainly sobering, and I think President Trump should have an honest conversation. We are in a wartime like other leaders do, and acknowledge what's going on and continue to make the case to the American people that it's worth it, because there is a serious cost. I also think there are things to be optimistic about. We are deregulating. UAE is coming out of OPEC, which could mean less of a monopoly on that front. And I also am going to say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Republicans are not in a great spot, but I don't look at Democrats and think that they have it tied up for midterms either.
Can I say, the scars from this, but when you're dealing with an inflationary context, you have to show that you're going to take affirmative steps to address inflation. The president is exacerbating inflation. His tariffs are a price hike. The situation in the Middle East is leading to an energy crisis. And his biggest signature achievement was reducing healthcare benefits, cutting SNAP benefits to do a tax cut. So when he's contending with inflation, it's tough because his policies are worsening it. And then to hear Republicans say, just get over it, just deal with it, it's not where people are in this country. It's not where
it's about a serious tax.
It's true. It is true. And it probably is part of the reason that it cost Democrats the election. It is true that Democrats were slow to acknowledge and recognize the pain that Americans were going through. But what Democrats were not doing, what Joe Biden was not doing at the same time, was repainting the pool for $15 million and walking around with a rendition of a ballroom that's now going to cost $1.5 billion with a B. and unveiling gold-plated statues of
He renovated the
statues of
Situation Room and
himself.
they spent tens of millions of dollars
And
doing it.
you know, I mean, so the tone deafness. The Secretary of Transportation wasn't on a 7-month road trip with his 9 children for a TV
Sean Duffy
show.
is not.
So
he was not. You know that he was not on a road trip for 7 months.
No.
You know that is factually
okay, he has been on a road trip during
for a
those
couple
7
of
months.
days at a time.
Okay,
he was not on for
while
7
gas,
months.
Okay.
while
That's
gas,
just not fair
while
and not
people are
accurate.
paying
He was
$6
filming a
for gas, so
reality
the level
show
of
road trip.
Exactly.
A road trip reality
At a couple
show
days
over the
at a
course
time,
of
over the course of 7
While
months.
TSA
Where you had a
agents-
previous
okay,
transportation
while
secretary who
TSA
took
agents
full
aren't
time
getting
off.
paid,
Not sure that makes it better.
while
but
gas
It does
is
make it
at
better. Come on.
$5.99 a gallon, while we are having all sorts of FAA issues, while there's
Then you
cruise
don't have to
lines
make,
with
but my
viruses,
point is, you don't
and
have to
that
make
is
something
what-
up to make
I
a
am not
point.
making
I
it up.
think you can make
During
very
the
valid
7
points
months,
here.
He has taken days off during the 7 months to go on a road trip for a TV show. Which part of that is inaccurate?
Well, you said he was taking off 7 full
No, I
months.
didn't say
Yeah,
he
that's
was
exactly
taking
what
off
you said.
7
I
That is
think
what you
he's
said.
allowed
It
to
is.
see his 9 children every
Right.
month for a couple
Exactly.
days. I don't begrudge him that.
And tell America to go on road trips while the gas is $5.99
I guess at
a
the end
gallon.
of the day, if what we're talking about is the transportation secretary filming a reality show, it's probably not a good sign for this administration.
I'm fine with
one
the
way
secretary
or
celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country.
We'll leave it there. The Trump Tower that has...
What Anna Navarro exposed in this segment is something more and more Americans are starting to notice about modern Republican politics. The outrage often depends less on the issue itself and more on who happens to be in power when it happens. Because if Republicans truly believed everything they said during the Biden years about gas prices, inflation, and the cost of living, then by their own standards, they should be hammering Donald Trump right now over rising fuel prices tied to a conflict his own administration escalated. But instead, the rhetoric completely changed overnight. Under Biden, it was, "This is unacceptable. People are suffering. The president is responsible." But under Trump, suddenly it's, "Relax, be patient. Sacrifice is necessary." That's not principle, that's partisan performance. And Anna Navarro's larger point was really about that hypocrisy and double standard. But instead of addressing the substance of her argument, Jason Rantz immediately pivoted into a tiny side dispute about Pete Buttigieg filming a television show. Why? Because it's a common tactic in these debates. When MAGA commentators can't defend the broader argument, they often try to derail the conversation into technicalities and distractions instead. But the main issue remained unanswered. Why was economic pain under Biden treated like a national emergency, while economic pain under Trump is suddenly considered understandable? And the answer is obvious, because the standards were never consistent in the first place. Republicans spent years turning gas prices into a political weapon. They slapped "I did that" stickers on gas pumps and blamed Biden personally for every increase, even during a time of global inflation, supply chain disruptions, and the economic fallout from the Ukraine war. They simplified everything into one message. If gas prices rise under a Democrat, the president is directly responsible. Okay, fine, but if that's the standard Republicans created, then by their own logic, Trump owns this situation too, especially since this particular instability is tied much more directly to decisions made inside his own White House. That's the uncomfortable part MAGA commentators want to avoid, because unlike some of the global inflation pressures under Biden, this current Iran-related instability is much harder to separate from Trump's own foreign policy decisions. Trump chose escalation. Trump abandoned diplomatic agreements. Trump pursued confrontation instead of stability. And now Americans are once again dealing with rising fuel costs and economic uncertainty. So Republicans can't spend years insisting presidents control gas prices and then suddenly pretend presidents have no responsibility once their own guy is back in office. That contradiction destroys credibility. Anna Navarro also touched on something deeper that matters politically: tone and symbolism. During economic hardship, voters pay attention not just to policy, but to whether leaders seem connected to ordinary people's struggles that way. That's why messaging telling Americans to accept sacrifice sounds so dangerous politically, especially when it comes from people who spent years attacking Democrats over the exact same issue. Americans get resentful when elites ask regular people to absorb hardship while appearing insulated from the consequences themselves. And that resentment becomes even stronger when those same politicians previously weaponized the issue for partisan gain. The conversation about Obama's Iran nuclear deal also mattered because it highlights the long-term consequences of prioritizing political point scoring over stability. The JCPOA wasn't perfect, but it created oversight and a diplomatic framework designed to prevent escalation. Trump tore it apart because Republicans wanted Obama's legacy to fail politically, and now many of the same people who celebrated ending that deal are asking Americans to tolerate the economic fallout that followed. That's why this issue feels so frustrating to many voters. It increasingly looks like crises are being created through reckless political decisions, and then ordinary people are told to deal with the consequences while politicians argue on television. And politically, Republicans may be making a huge mistake here. Americans are exhausted by inflation, instability, wars, and constant economic uncertainty. Trump was reelected largely because many voters believed he would lower costs and restore stability. But if his presidency instead becomes associated with another Middle Eastern conflict, rising gas prices, and obvious contradictions from his defenders, that becomes a major political vulnerability. And the biggest problem for Republicans is that they created this accountability standard themselves. Democrats didn't force Republicans to make gas prices a daily political weapon during the Biden years. Republicans chose that strategy. Republicans taught voters to directly associate presidents with energy prices. Now that same standard is boomeranging right back onto Donald Trump. And suddenly MAGA wants patience. Suddenly MAGA wants nuance. Suddenly MAGA wants Americans to think about the bigger picture. But they spent years refusing to give Democrats those same considerations. That's why clips like this are politically damaging. Not because of one argument on one panel, but because they expose how performative so much of the outrage really was all along. And once voters start clearly seeing that hypocrisy, partisan messaging becomes much harder to sell.